So it is a crisp 5 in the morning, and you know what that means? That means Lasengo decided to drop something over on the JP side of things. And forgive me if I maybe sound a little bit different. I think I'm getting over whatever I had. I didn't go to the doctor or whatever, but I was feeling kind of under the weather. So if I still sound a bit weird, that's the reason why. But I was really excited when they dropped this because of the units that went on raid up. You know, I was thinking, oh, cool, this means we're going to be getting more buffs, because if you've been following the JP side of things, they have just been throwing buffs like every couple of weeks, it seems. They just will drop a really good buff for, you know, a servant, even if it's simple as just giving them a battery or something. It's always something that's generally helpful. So I was going to use this as an excuse to be like, oh, let's talk about these cool new buffs that they had. But then I looked and I didn't see that anybody got anything. In fact, the only thing that they mentioned at the bottom is the buff that Fujino got. And I now wanted to use this as more of a discussion of why I don't think any of these servants actually needed a buff. Like, it's actually not that big of a deal, because this might be something that other players maybe go through. They see somebody going up on raid up and they're like, oh man, they brought back this random raid up for, I don't know, pick some random servant that, you know, you don't think is like super great. I have one on the top of my head, the elephant statue lady, Janako. That's her name. Sorry, again, getting over something. So I'm still trying to recover from that. But like, you think of her, it's like, oh, she could definitely use a buff or something. But they don't give it to her whenever she goes on raid up or something along those lines, you know. But as I was like looking at all these servants, I was like, well, they're actually all fine. Don't take this the wrong way. The only one that I really thought of that could get a really decent buff was Muramasa and Koushun Koji, but that's more for Muramasa's first skill, which I'll kind of talk about in a second, because this video, we're just going to go over like why I think these servants are fine. I just want to use that as a metric, because there might also be some older players that maybe remember Shiki from year one, where she wasn't the greatest servant, let's just put that lightly, but now I do think Shiki is quite a strong servant over here on the JP side of things. You may be like, well, she's only got one hit on her AoE NP. She can't really, you know, loop that well. But again, not everybody has to be the most insane looper. When you look at everything that she's bringing to the table, being able to pierce invincibility, get through defense, she now has a solid arts buff, you know, going for herself. She has some support by removing debuffs and refunding NP. It's super, super nice. And then they fixed the one thing that was kind of not a demerit, but it was just an odd thing that the free-to-play had a battery, but the 5-star limited one had just a heal for some reason. But now, you know, they went ahead and decided to give her a battery, right? Which is like really nice and helping her kind of more consistently get to her NP. I guess you could say that the second skill could probably get a buff, because while the attack buff is nice, for some reason having 36% debuff resistance just doesn't really look good. I mean, it's not even debuff resistance, if I remember correctly. It's mental debuff resistance, which is really insane. Especially for, you know, if you're a huge lore head like me, you know how significant Saber Shiki is, we'll put it lightly, for the entirety of just, not even, I guess, just like Fate's lore itself, but like for the entirety of the whole Type Moon works. You know, she's a really big deal, to put it lightly. And he's like, oh, okay, we're giving her this really weird skill. If you wanted to knock that up to 100% debuff resistance, or maybe even technically just 80%, because she does have the passive 20%. So you could do that and then maybe slap on another buff on there. Maybe you could give her like arts down on one enemy or whatever have you. And, you know, just so she gets some technical extra damage, right? But I think she's actually fine. You know, I think she's perfectly fine the way she is. I can't really think of anything that I would like to really see her get. I mean, obviously you could give her a power mod, I guess, but I think it's kind of nice that she's one of the few servants that has kind of escaped the checklist that new releases now have, where it's like, do you have a battery? Yes. Do you have a gimmick / power mod? That's really good. It's like, okay, yes, you got that. You know, do you have good card buffs? And now with Yui, it's like, do you have an Omni card buff? You know, now you're, you know, more usable with this other new servant that just came out. So regardless, I'm very happy that she doesn't have stuff like that. Fujino, I did look through hers as well. I couldn't really think of anything, actually, because they just buffed her. The one thing she didn't have was immediate access to NP, and they decided to give her a battery. So other than that, I mean, I think she's fine. You know, I can't really think of anything that I would really like to see her get. I mean, her guts is, I guess, maybe reviving with 1 HP. You could make that like a normal 2 to 3k guts, and but I don't know, like her having just the 2k damage cut for 3 turns, for some reason got it in my head that she was like Emiya Alter, or it was hits based, but no, she just has it for free. I mean, overall, I just think she's a very like strong servant, especially after the NP upgrade as well that they gave her. We're just talking about the checklist, but her power mod is not the craziest. Having Arthur's gimmick, I mean, we see what that does for that guy, but at least she has survivability and stuff along those lines, so she's a bit more usable. It's just a nice gimmick that she has on top of that. But Muramasa is one that, okay, I know I mentioned at the beginning, people would be like, dude, Muramasa is crazy. And I agree. I think he's really nuts. The only thing, and this is going to sound like looping brain rot to a lot of people, but I do think you could just make the Omni card buff 3 times for 3 turns, and also maybe make the star weight. I would want to say that it could be 3 turns, because oftentimes when I bring Muramasa to a CQ or something, I do miss that he doesn't have more star weight for longer. So that way, if I'm using him with, say, Lady Avalon, or if I've snuck Merlin onto the team, or we've got the 2030s on the 2 Castorias, whatever, we have stars in rotation, it can be a little bit annoying sometimes that he can't just kind of glorb them all for himself. And then I do think for looping, it would be kind of convenient if he could have the 3 times for 3 turns, because I'm thinking of a stage like, say, the Las Vegas stage on the Bleached Earth, where it is a little bit annoying because that middle stage, even at NP2, sometimes it can get a little RNG dependent. It's a little bit better now that I can plug suit in, say, what's her face? Proto Avalon, right? Instead of Oberon, because I don't have Oberon, but it's besides the point. Now that I can plug seed her, and it's gotten a little bit more consistent in being able to actually take that guy out, but I used to have to either fire an NP2 or higher Castoria to guarantee the kill, or I'd have to actually use his first skill on that node, and then just, the stacking would be enough by the time the Wave 3 came around. But yeah, it was a little bit annoying for that. I think it'd make him a little bit more consistent, because Muramasa could do some very solid damage when he has this buff up, especially after he starts stacking, because again, like if you look at like a damage chart or something, it's going to show you, oh, here's Muramasa's like normal damage, right? But actually, once this guy really starts to get going, his damage is really, really solid. It's very, very strong. So I think that could have been very nice if they could have tossed that to him. And plus, who wouldn't love to see a Muramasa buff? Like, bro is goated. Just give him something, just give him a little something. But that's the easiest thing I thought that they could give him that wouldn't be too nutty. I guess you could also maybe do the Pierce Invul for 3 turns on the second skill, but I still think the second skill is already fine. Like, dude is rocking 100% crit damage for free. He's got 100% genning rate for his stars, so he's just mopping up stars all over the place. Like, I don't know about all that. So it's probably a fine skill. Koushun Koji, I know for a lot of people is going to be one of those servants that it's like, well, ZTL, what about her? Like, she could definitely use a buff, right? And look, I know she's quick AoE, so people are going to automatically hate on Koushun Koji a lot. I think what they could do, though, because you'll see on like damage charts and whatnot that she can do really, really good damage, and she can hit really hard, but that usually is taking into account the bound power mod being effective. If you're, on the NA side and you don't know, Koushun Koji on her 3rd skill has bound kind of like Amakusa and John, where it's like the specials type of stun, but it only applies for 1 turn. So kind of like Summer Kama, you get 1 turn of that like really insane power mod. I think if they wanted to make it maybe a little bit better, and I don't know if this is a coding nightmare, but if you wanted her to be, I guess, specifically more insane for farming, and I guess this would be good for CQs as well, but you could have a terror status thing that does bound instead of stun, and then applies at the beginning of the turn. That's really the easiest way that I can kind of think about it. I mean, she does have the chance to bound all the enemies, obviously, on her overcharge as well, so you are technically able to get it all 3 waves, but again, like, even though it doesn't go through like stun resistance or like magic, or no, I think it does go through magic resistance, but not just like stun resistance, is the only thing that it doesn't like kind of take into account, or like the stun immunities and stuff like that. It's still like 60 to 100%. I do believe it still goes through magic resistance. So say like we were just looking at Shiki, who has base 20% at the very least. If you have to farm against her, I don't know why you would, but just, humor me on it. That 60% goes down to a 40% bound chance, which can be a little bit frustrating, right? It can make her feel a little inconsistent. I mean, I think everything else for her kit is fine. Sure, she only has 1 invincibility, but it's for the entire party. Like, that's pretty good. They gave her the split batteries, which I think are better for your quick AoE units, because they don't necessarily always need to use the whole 50% battery. Being able to piece them together, I think, is very, very nice. I mean, they gave her an attack buff. They gave her a decent quick damage buff. I think all that stuff is kind of fine. I would think maybe that or like a bound success rate type thing, that could also be really good. That's probably easier than doing the terror bound effect. You know, that's probably a bit easier than that. But I think if they gave it some kind of buff effect like that, I think that could definitely help her out a lot. Which, I mean, if you played the event, you know, Koushun Koji gets a pretty cool redesign, quote unquote, I guess we'll call it. If you've seen Monster Masayume, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, she gets a pretty cool, like, sick-looking redesign for the event. And I'm like, come on, man, you could toss her a little buff. Obviously, it'd be frustrating when fighting her because she would be bounding you all the time. But I'm like, you know, come on, you could give her a little something, something, because I like the idea. It's kind of an aside, but, you know, this point does go hand in hand with her being able to hit that level of damage more consistently. I like the idea of, say, even like Ushi who's kind of a byproduct of this as well, that maybe quick servants aren't able to loop as easily as art servants, but you just start letting them do way more damage. Because you look at someone like Ushi, she just does redonkulous damage. She hits like a freight train, right? Same thing can also be said for Alice, the new castle that we got. You know, her initial damage is like, oh, okay, well, it's not that crazy. You know, it's not like she's doing insane amounts of damage, but then you take into account like the 50 different variables she has, and she can start getting into some really good numbers. She can start doing some pretty sick damage. And so, I don't know, I like the idea of them being able to kind of just do more damage than, say, the arts units. Like, maybe that's the balancing act. And especially with quick units now being able to also use Black Grail, I think that one advantage that arts had, where it's like, oh, well, they can use Black Grail, even if Quick could do more damage, you know, arts will just always out-damage them anyway. But now that Quick is getting their grubby little mitts on that, I think that could be a good direction. A little disappointed we didn't get to see any buffs, but it did let me, I don't know, kind of voice things a little bit. Now, the 3-star, I think maybe she's just too new or something, but I think she's also fine. Although, she did come out in like October, I think, so I guess she could have technically gotten a buff. And I always will prefer like the lower rarity units getting the buffs, because as someone who is mostly free to play on JP, you know, I only really do the GSSRs and the Destiny Order summons, and then mostly free to play on NA, unless there's someone like Morgan that comes out that really piques my interest, or, you know, if a meta-defining unit like Koyenskaya comes out, I'm like, all right, I probably need to get this servant, especially if I want to be using Morgan in all my farming comms. But I always really like to see these like 3-stars get buffed, because it really helps out the bottom floor of FGO. You know, it helps out your free-to-play players, and often, even if they're good enough, you know, you have someone like Casterku, they're just broken enough, you know, even your whales can just use it. It's like, dude, Black Grail farming, my favorite. I love doing that with this 3-star servant. Although, maybe Ku is not a great example because he's story locked. But I don't know. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Again, if I was a little scatterbrained, I wrote down all my thoughts and everything on like some notes in front of me, because I knew I was going to be a little all over the place, because 1, it's early, and 2, still kind of getting over something, still like whatever sickness I have. I don't know. It's spring disease, you know, surely, right? We're going into spring now, and it's just like, you know what, seasons are changing. You're getting zapped with the sickness. I don't know, man. But with all that being said, if you guys have any other discussion ideas, this one just kind of came to me randomly, and then I started working on it a little bit. But yeah, if you have any other ideas, drop those in the comments down below, and I will probably make a discussion on them. Because as I always say, I love talking about this game. When you're passionate about something, it's just fun to keep yapping, right? It's fun to have a yap fest. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace.